Los Angeles is where you were raised. I believe, if I have my information correct.
You got it right. People have said to me since I was, 18. Well, if it doesn't work here for you, kid, you can always go back home. Yeah, I am home, sir.
Well, I've been out there many times. I love Los Angeles, I do, and I have a lot of friends out there, and so I'm quite fond of it. But I can't imagine what it would be like, growing up out there as a child. I'm sure it was quite different.
Definitely. Well, we all grew up. I ask people a lot because people come and go in Los Angeles. I'm interested in other people, and I ask them, where you came from, is it way different than when you were growing up? And everyone says, yeah, everything has changed. So L.A., they didn't even have that Ventura Freeway when I was a kid. It was a different town. It was very small. People knew each other. But it's called the heart chakra of the country. So it pumps, my grandmother would say, Marilyn, I was about 6, playing outside, and she called me, and I knew that her tone of her voice, that something was serious. Sit down. I sat down. She said, that the country is tilted. I went, no, I didn't know that. And she said, yeah, it's tilted. And she said, so all the nuts roll into California. And I went, okay. I'm thinking, I didn't say. She said, do you understand that? I went, nuts. And yeah. She said, okay, I want you to know that because there are a lot of nuts, and she was from Boston with an accent. There's a lot of nuts here, and I want you to know that. It was a little young. I didn't understand that. So she said, okay, do you understand? I said, yes, thank you. So you can go play now. So I went right out the front door, so the backyard, to look for nuts and bolts in the street because I figured they'd have to be in the gutter, right? I didn't understand. I took everything so literally. And that comes with brain trauma. People with brain trauma tend to take things very literally. And
yes.
I had when I was 6, I was hurt. I had a very bad concussion, actually. Went into a coma for 5.5 weeks. It was. No. They didn't know anything about head trauma in those days. So when I woke up, my mother put my uniform on and sent me back to the nuns. And that's, it was like Survivor, not. But I would consequently be a very quiet and very shy child. And in fact, I never, ever wanted to be an actress. It was, I was totally infatuated and in love with the idea of being in the Peace Corps. And so I went into the Peace Corps, and they put me in languages, sociology, psychology. And then after the year and a half, or the second year, I was ready to go to Africa. I was so excited. Mm-hmm. And I remember this gentleman, I can't remember his name, shaking his head saying, we can't send you like this. I went, like what? I got good grades. What are you talking about? And they said, Marilyn, you can talk a blue streak, but you can't look. You're not looking at anybody. I said, excuse me? He said, you need eye contact. And I was so shy, I had avoided that all my life. Mm-hmm. I could talk a blue streak. I could entertain people, but I was never looking at someone in the eye. He said, you can't go to Africa and try to teach people if you can't look at their eye. And what could I do? He said, so we're sending you to a drama course. I went, no, not that. The idea of being in front of people was absolutely, I really thought I'd have a heart attack. And it wasn't funny at all. And so after the first semester, my father had left when I was 9. And after I graduated from high school, the nuns were looking for a place to send me, and they called my father, and he had just married a woman just a little older than me and had 2 babies, knocked out 2. And so they said, oh, we'll have her. And they thought I'd be a free babysitter. So that lasted about a year. But in that situation, I went to college, and I came home with, as I said, after the first year, with my papers from the Peace Corps that I had to have an adult, my parents, sign, one of the adults. Well, my mother was in Washington, D.C. in another life, and my father looked at this and started to laugh, going, no daughter of mine's going to Africa. Are you? And I was like, what? And he took it like, he said, I'm not going to sign this, and dismissed me. And I was shocked and went in my room and cried a lot, probably, because in the morning my first class was drama. And when I made that class, apparently my eyes were all red still, and I didn't look like myself. And so before the class started, the professor said, Marilyn Hassett out in the hall. And I went, oh, what did I do, right? Well, out in the hall, because I was used to the nuns being that way. And he said, what's wrong? I said, what do you mean? He said, your face, something's happened. You're not your normal self. And I broke down crying again. And he said, what is going on? I said, my father won't sign the papers for the Peace Corps. And I will never forget the look on his face, like bewilderment. And he said, why did you want to go to the Peace Corps in the first place? I went, don't you remember? That's why I'm here. Because I was so shy. He said, well, Marilyn, you've shown a lot of, some talent. He didn't say, you've shown some talent. So, on stage. So, you can, he said, why do you want to be in the Peace Corps? That's right. Because I'd read this expression in the Free Press, and it was like 1967, I guess. I don't know, one of those years, late 60s. And he said, because you've shown some talent here, you could raise consciousness, because I said that's what I wanted to do, was raise consciousness. And I believed that I could do that in the Peace Corps. He said, Marilyn, you could raise consciousness from the stage. I didn't understand what he was trying to say. I said, what? He said, yes, you've shown some talent. So you could, think of the people you could work, you could affect on the stage. I still didn't get it. He said, maybe you could do television one day. Think of all the people you could raise consciousness that way. And my mouth fell open. I'd never thought about that. I mean, and he could see, he knew. The first day of the drama course, I was in the center of the room, the chairs, and I got way down low because I didn't want him to notice me. Mm-hmm. And he said, the girl down low, get up. And the first, day, get up on stage. I thought for sure. I never been around boys to understand how do you study with boys looking at your legs. It was a real culture shock. But anyway, I came back from school that day and said to my father, okay, I'm going to be an actress. That was even a worse reaction. And his wife was looking to get me out anyway, and wanted my new car. And I always had 3 jobs at a time. And so I was thrown out, and I was 17.
Wow.
And I really was not prepared for life. I had uniforms. Well, I'd gotten rid of them by then, but that was, my consciousness was pretty much in a uniform. And by the grace of God, I called a girlfriend that I'd gone to school with who came and picked me up. It was a couple hours out of L.A., and I was going to live in her closet because she failed to tell me that she was betting a married doctor, and I didn't believe in that stuff. He would come at all hours, and they would have sex, and I was like, So I'd get in the closet. That's how I became in the closet. So I knew that wasn't going to last long, and I didn't have the money to have my pictures taken, and my father had taken my car, so I was like zilch, and I found a list of photographers there used to be a great bookstore called Samuel French on Sunset. Someone had told me I could read about acting there. So I went, and it was free. They had a copy of casting directors and producers and photographers. So I went to the top of the page, and I called, and I didn't know how I was going to handle it, but within moments of meeting me, I had told him I didn't have any money and I wanted to do something to have my picture taken. So there was something called, I can't remember now, testing. I think it was called testing. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is they would shoot photographs of you for hours or the whole day, which is what this guy did, making you pose in certain situations. And he would let you, then I worked in the dark room to help finish the photos. And I wish I could remember that. And he would give me 3 photos from it. but he didn't tell me was, apparently I was photogenic. He sent my photos with his credit attached to Playboy magazine.
Oh, wow.
And they started pursuing me, and I was like, you got to be joking, you know. And they would pursue me and all the way until I had done the other side of the mountain. And I was really, there were times when I went without food because of the situation. And I'm thinking about that time. I'm like,
yeah.
So I do the other side of the mountain as the all-American girl that I was. And Ed Feldman, who was the producer, called me up one day. I remember where I was sitting in my apartment, telling me, because he had started out in publicity, that he was thrilled that he'd gotten a great offer for us, and I could change my image and, you know, be, you know, not just the all-American girl. I said, okay, what is it? He said, well, Playboy has offered us 4 pages, and they never give this to you, Marilyn. You get to approve what is printed. My mouth fell open, needless to say, because for years I had said no to these people, and every year they would up the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it would be up 1,000 or something. I still, you know, it didn't matter the money, and I remember saying to the Playboy representative, like, my grandmother would have a heart attack. Well, in the process, my grandmother passed away, and they were still calling. I realized it's not my grandmother, it's me. And there they were wanting me to do this at Feldman. They did no publicity, really, for the other side of the mountain. It's amazing it got anywhere, but it was a sleeper. Anyway, I said, can I call you back? And he said, yes, because I didn't want to yell, and I tend to have a very loud voice. I got off the phone and I started yelling, you know. And I think I got yelled into my pillow as well. I was so upset. And I don't think you should print this, by the way, Adam. I said to him, I called him back, and he said, so, you know, what's going on? I said, it's a great idea, Ed, the All-American Girl in the Playboy magazine. I was being sarcastic. He didn't pick that up. I said, so I'll agree to do it. And he said, they won't just a little frontal nudity? He said, yeah, just a little. I said, I'm fine with total nudity. You know, I'm an athlete. I'm in great shape. You know, and I was bullshitting, right? And he said, great, Marilyn, great. And I said, I just have one request. And he said, what's that, Marilyn? And I said, the first page that I do, I'll be totally naked. He went, oh my God, fabulous. And I'll be sitting in a golden wheelchair. And that silence, I can still hear that pregnant pause. It was like a minute went by, and suddenly I hear him go, all right, Marilyn, we'll talk to you later. And now he never, ever called me back. And that's sort of, I mean, I've had people say to me, even when I turned 50, you know, you've got a great body, you should show it off, you know. But now that I'm 77, I'm going, wow, that would have been nice to have seen how I look then. But, you know, you just can't take yourself out of your own skin, you know.
That's right. I think you probably made the right choice at the time. It was probably
for the time it was. I probably would have had a breakdown, to tell you the truth, because it was so. Well, I couldn't have done it, you know. And I know, and I was watching the film Great Gatsby the other night, and there was a reason I wasn't in that film. That was another offer, and I would get not only offers, I would book jobs, and then the producer, generally, or the director said, let's have dinner. I did that a few times, and then realized it wasn't dinner. It was dinner, but then they expected an after dinner. And so I got a reputation of being difficult, which really offended me, because I was always on time, I always knew my words, but I was difficult in the social structure, that this was not a lady you're going to bed. And in this town, that apparently was very rare. And I would read a lot about the women, like even Lucille Ball had to put out, because the men were running the show. And I was shocked that, I'm like, Marilyn, you're never going to, I remember this idiot telling me I was never going to work in this town again, like I ever had. And that was in the same year that this casting director told me that.
Yeah.
I had to drive onto the Universal lot because I was under contract. And this casting director did not. Suddenly the tables were turned, and he's walking onto the lot, and I'm walking by. I'm saying hello to the gate man, and, you know, it was like my home territory now. And he looks at me, and now I've starred in a film I didn't put out. And he looked at me and looked down and went, "Hello, Marilyn." I said, "Hello, it's so great to work in this town." And walked away. I mean, it was like I wanted to say, see, it can be done. But honestly, I don't know if it's probably, I don't know many people that could say the same, unfortunately. Now the tables have turned quite a bit, and people are out of the closet. And I thought, well, great, now guys are going to know how I felt, you know, being hit on constantly. Yeah, and I remember someone saying, "Oh, you'll miss it when you get older." Oh, I don't miss it at all. Being whistled at. No. It's fine. You know, I'm old. I said when I was younger I was going to grow old gracefully, and I meant no cosmetic work. And
good for you.
I
Good
thought,
for you.
well, it's just who I am. You know, I earned all those lines, and so and my friends just said, "Marilyn, just a few fillers," that's what they call fillers, and you won't have those. I said, you know, I'm going to stay with the lines. And I'm glad I did.
Well, yeah. Well, tell us. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt there. Go ahead.
You know, I mean, I see women that have been done, and I'm the last one to realize it. That someone would have to say, "She's been done," because my eyes don't see that. But I do know a few actresses that really regretted it because they lost their character, their individuality, which is, you know, you spend a lifetime earning that. I didn't want to give it away, but it's easy to say that, and then I looked in the mirror the other day and I thought I was my mother, and I'm not alone. I'm sure a lot of women feel this way, or you catch I didn't mean to look in the mirror. I was walking by a mirror, and I did a double take, going, "Who's that old lady?" And it was me. Which is fine. You know, I'm grateful that I can walk and take care of myself, and that I am so grateful. And I do think being grateful really helps in life, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad you're still able to give me this interview. The truth. This is a real. It's a real pleasure for me because I've always wanted to talk to you. The movie's meant so much to me since I was aware of it. I was born in 1970, and I was aware of the film, but I had not seen.
Wow.
I saw it in 1990, and I saw it with my mother on VHS tape, and I was just immediately.
Yay.
I fell in love with it and the sequel, and I thought, man, wouldn't it just be great if I could chat and find out what that process.
I love that.
Well, yeah, and so
here we are.
Well, my current life partner, she had never seen the film, and so I ran it for her last week, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yay!
And I looked over, and she was crying, and so it still has the power after all these years. Now, I wanted I wanted to find out.
Is your mom still alive?
My mom is.
Is your mom still alive?
She turns 82 in June. She's
God bless her.
Yeah, she's somewhat independent, but she has a lot of health needs that require her to have skilled nursing. So we're dealing with that, but she's still very much mentally with it, and she can do some things for herself.
Wonderful. Bravo to her.
Yeah.
And does she know that we're having a conversation? Because you guys watched the film together, you got to tell her, "Hey, I was talking to Marilyn today."
Well,
she might get a kick out of it, you know.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, she will, but my daughter is also a fan of the film because I ran it for her about 5 years ago, and she's a fan as well. And I did tell her that you and I were going to talk.
Holy cow!
So, so there's younger generations.
I've got 3 generations going.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It is.
I'm honored, Adam.
Well, I wanted to get
That's amazing.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, and we appreciate your work. I wanted to find out what it was like to, what it was like when you actually went in for the role for the cat, to try out for it, and what it was like to actually, learn to be a paraplegic, so to speak. I wanted to find out a little bit about that.
Okay. There's a couple of great stories. You can tell me next if you get bored with anything.
Oh, it's not boring at all.
And my mother warned me before she passed on her deathbed. She said, I know you're going to write the books. And I went, Mom, let's just talk about you, right? And because it was her deathbed. And she said, no, I want, you're very sensitive. You've always been over emotional. And people are not going to believe your stories. And I got to prepare you for that because you're going to be heartbroken when you tell a story and they don't believe you. And I said, how did this come up? She said, Marilyn, I was your mother. I am your mother. I lived through some of those stories, and I found it hard to believe then. No one is going to believe. And I thought, oh, Mom, and I tried to change the subject. And a year later, I was in Hawaii visiting a friend from kindergarten, and she said, oh, Marilyn, I don't know, people were telling stories, and it was my turn, so I said something. And she patted me and said, oh, isn't Marilyn a good storyteller? She thought I was making it up. My mother was right. I was crushed that my oldest friend would think I was making it up, right? And so I remember that anyway. And I now gotten to that age where I don't care. And I've got journals since I was 12. I have a lot of books in me, and we'll write them up someday. But it just goes against my grain not to tell the truth. And as my mother would try to convince me, and she did, she said, Marilyn, with your stories and your life, you should not exaggerate, which I'm a Sagittarius. That's a sign that tends to exaggerate and embellish to entertain. She said, don't do that, Marilyn, because it's hard to believe anyway. If you start to exaggerate, they're going to think you're absolutely nuts. And she was right. So I learned not to exaggerate. But okay, to get to approach the film, let's see. I was wearing my brother's cowboy chaps. He lived in the Colorado Rockies. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't getting any work. I was driving a cab, first cab driver in L.A., and my mother said, don't tell anybody. It's a shame on the family. And I went, well, it'll pay my rent right now. And I remember I was driving the cab, and there was Lynn Stallmaster, terrific casting director, still alive, yelled across the divided street going, Marilyn, call my wife. It's a good audition. And I was literally, I mean like I had a plane ticket to leave that week, to leave L.A. for good, join my brother in the Rockies and create a theater company, which I thought would be a lot of fun and closer to who I am, to be in nature instead of the cement jungle I live in. So I went, all right. In my brother's chaps, I actually went to this audition with a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I was so tired, and most actors have this after a while, of being rejected, which is part of the game, over and over, or, making eyes at me for something else. So I had this chip on my shoulder, and I thought it was going to just a commercial. I had no idea it was a real movie. And when I walked in, I went, oh, this is a real movie. I could tell by the people that were there, and the actresses were all, poofed up and looking great. And there was me and my brother's chaps, right? My agent said, go on natural, Marilyn. I said, and I was literally dressed for Colorado. And I came in, and they handed me the script, and by then I was so nervous I dropped it. And I bent down, and the chaps ripped from my pelvis to my ass. And I was totally exposed. And the director went, ah! And I went, ah! And he turned around and yelled for the casting woman, Stallmaster, to come in and put something on the girl, So they put a coat. They wrapped a coat around me. And he said, okay, you can read now. I went, oh, great, right? So I did some kind of read. And figured I'd never hear from them again. And something got delayed. I can't remember with my brother. I can't remember because it was months. Maybe I went there and came back, something like that. I think it was 3 months where they went to New York and Chicago or wherever people were going to cast in those days. I was told that they had seen over 300 actresses for the part.
Wow.
And they called me that much later when I was really ready to go, saying, would I come in for a screen test? I had never, maybe I'd had one, but it didn't amount to much. Oh, yeah, because the producer had something else in mind. That was NBC. So I go in to do this audition, or screen test, I'm sorry. And I return to the same office, and there's some secretary hands me something to sign, a contract. So unlike the other actresses, I read it, and they kept saying, are you ready? Are you ready? I'm like, no, I'm slow reader. I have to finish this. And the director comes out and goes, are you ready? Come on. I said, why would I sign this? I'm making more money now than I am, and I did movies of the week and commercials, as actresses do, putting the money away for Colorado. And he said, Marilyn, really, the producer wants someone else, and I would like you, and you can buy yourself out of the contract. Being naive, I fell for it. And the producer, these people are dead now, so I can say this.
Oh, yes.
The producer isn't, but an actress came in that was up there against me, I guess, in contention. She was there for the role also. But she came in without underwear and spread herself out for the producer, who had you can't print this. Anyway, it had the hots for her. And that's who he wanted. And it would have been very wrong for the role because she was a sexy, big-busted blonde. Everything I was not, right? I was there in my, now I dressed up, so maybe it was jeans and a sweatshirt. But it was just, so the producer wanted that girl, and the director wanted me, so I went in and did the screen test. And I guess I remember. This may be very boring, but
no, not at all. And I think Ed Pressman has died. I think he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah, he did. So I think he's no longer with us. So for whatever it's worth, unfortunately,
his wife and I. She said, "I'll be your Hollywood mother." But then she would believe stories that my ex would tell her, which were totally fabricated. But anyway, okay, then I can tell you this. Anyway, so I do the screen test, and there's a lot of there may be 3 or 4 pages, and by the second or third page, it kind of called for the actress to cry. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't feel like she would cry at that moment. So I waited till the very end, and a tear came out of my eye and ran down. I was fighting it. And they said, cut. And I said, okay, thank you. And I felt I did terribly. But he really wanted somebody that didn't rush for the tears. People that hold it in. If you're, most of us don't want to be shown crying. And she was such a strong woman. She didn't hang out her laundry, shall we say. So the only one thing I had, I paid my rent, and I also belonged to a gymnasium. So I went to the gym that day or the next day, and this actress that had made a big play for Ed Feldman came up to me, and she said, "Oh, Marilyn, I know that you're up for the other side of the mountain." I said, "Yeah." She said, "So am I." I said, "Oh, great." She said, "But I got the role today." I went, "Oh, okay." So I put my arms around her and gave her congratulations. And she said, no, it's okay. And she whips out a back pocket. It must have been rehearsed. She said, "But Marilyn, I was supposed to do this film shooting in Miami. And I already called them and said I got this big job. and I told them about you, and they said that would be great. And I was so impressed. I went, you, oh, really? And she said, yeah, but you have to be on a flight tonight at 10:45. I went, thank you so much, Karen. And it was Karen. Thank you so much. Oh, my gosh. And I was like all over her grateful. And so I go home to pack.
Mm-hmm.
And as I came up the stairs, I lived up in a loft, came up the stairs, there was a big thing of flowers. I went, oh, some guy's trying to make it again with me. And I just brought them and put them down and went to the restroom, and then the phone started ringing. And it was Ed and Larry Pierce. And I said, well, congratulations. And they said, no, congratulations to you. I said, what do you mean Karen got that? And they said, no, Marilyn, didn't you get the flowers? I said, yeah, I got the, are they from you? Go read the card. Did you read the card? No, I didn't read the card. Go read it, Marilyn. So I read the card, and it said, congratulations, you're our Jill. Never forget
wow.
it. I didn't understand. I was like a doofus. I just, what? Because I was ready to go to Miami. And they're saying, don't you get it? You got the role. I'm going, but she has the role. And so it was kind of a disconnected conversation, because I was trying to convince them that I didn't have the role, that I just talked to a woman at the gym who had the role. So for some reason, we ended the conversation, and I leaned out these wonderful 20-foot windows that I opened out onto the driveway, and there was Clint Eastwood crying while my neighbor was breaking up with him.
Wow.
So he looks up and he hears me open the window, goes, Marilyn, and Clint Eastwood crying, right? And I'll never forget, a gorgeous brown pickup truck, where you remember these things. He yells up, Marilyn, convince her not to leave me. I was like, what? And I'm yelling like, I don't know what this means. I don't understand this card. And Joanne, that was her name, said, Clint, I got to help Marilyn. Something's going on with Marilyn. She never liked this. So she runs up to look at the card. I said, what does this mean? She said, Marilyn, that means you got the role. So it was all kind of a huge surprise. And this lady named Joanne, my neighbor, was very in love with someone else, not an attractive man, but a wonderful writer, wrote comedy, wrote the Odd Couple, right? That's kind
Neil
of
Simon, yeah.
And she was, yeah, he adapted it for the television show.
Oh, I got you.
And, Clint Eastwood, and then but I would end up living in their guest house later on in life. But that's how I would discover I got the film.
Oh, that's a great story. It really is. Well, I'm sure
it's all true. I mean, pardon?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm sure after that, the next phase would have been learning to play the part, and I'm sure that was quite
You're
a
right
challenge.
There. They asked me on the first audition, did I ski? And you probably heard this from other actors. We all lie when it comes to getting work. Well, I had skied in high school, but just the bunny slopes. So I said, oh, yeah, sure. So they, after it sunk in that I got the role, Universal calls, and they're sending me up to Tahoe to ski, and an Olympic champion was going to show me how to ski 1950 style with these long wooden skis, that not the short ones we have today, but huge long skis. And they wanted me to ski in the way that they did in the 50s. So I went up to Tahoe, and by the time I got off the 8th ski toe, it was I'm terrified of heights too, terrified to this day.
Oh, wow!
And
wow.
The opening scene of the movie, I have to fly off the top of a mountain and ski down. After I think I say is, I love skiing or something like that, and then I ski. It has to be me. Can't do a stunt. So I had to be prepared to do that. That was tough. What was absolutely wonderful was I wanted to know what it was like to live in a wheelchair. And so I called the VA saying, could I come down and volunteer time or something like that? So I ended up down in the VA because of, and I had lost a boyfriend to Vietnam. So there were a lot of vets, Vietnam vets, kind of my age, you know. And I remember going in, Adam, I'll never forget this. I saw this room of guys that, for some reason, I didn't know about the girls. A room full of guys. They're all messed up. And so I said, hey, I'm Marilyn Hassett. I probably looked white as a sheet because I didn't know what to do. And this fellow was in a wheelchair, and he rolled over like he was going 60 miles an hour and said, hey, Marilyn, come on, sit on my lap. What? He didn't have a lap.
Oh, wow.
He had lost both legs. And I did like you. I went, oh, wow, I don't think I said it. I'm not sure what I did, but I can feel it in my stomach right now. It was just... So he grabbed one arm. He said, I told you to sit on my lap, and swung me around. Suddenly, I'm in this guy's arms in his wheelchair. Now, I don't know how that happened, you know, geographically, physically, but I went along with it. And what I would learn from those guys was invaluable to me to this day. The people in wheelchairs don't want to be looked down on, you know, I mean, up and down. You know, they want to be looked at straight on. And it's difficult for a person that's not in a wheelchair to understand that. So, but they're so present, and it's your job to be present and not to be up there, you know, and not looking down at someone. So I developed something where I'd always go down on my knees and talk to someone eye to eye. And I spent some time in the VA with these wonderful men that taught me so much. And then I went up to Bishop, California, where Jill grew up.
Yes.
And her brother became my technical advisor. And she had, I must say, she had a family made for a champion. Everybody rallied around Jill. She was the star, whether she was skiing or in a wheelchair. And knowing that woman, I imagine anyone would have seen it in a matter of an hour. She was an Olympic champion quadriplegic. There was nothing about her that was less than. And I would find out even some years ago, I mean, they wouldn't allow you to be a teacher in a wheelchair. All sorts of things. We didn't have handicap placards and ramps. What Jill did after the film, they'd given her, they didn't think it was going to make any money. So they gave her a piece of the gross, and she went to Washington, D.C. with that money and created all those handicap things that we have today. Isn't that amazing? That's why I became an actress. It worked. You know, I found a job where I could raise consciousness, and I still, in fact, I have it right here. Where this is Germany. It's in my purse way too long, but it has all the stamps on it, somebody that wanted me to sign something. And I remember the first fan letter I got. This young person said that his mother had gone to rent the film, and after the film, he told his mother he was ready to try physical therapy again. Now, if that doesn't make you happy about what you chose to do in life, right? That's why I became an actress. And I've had people around me saying, you know, what about being a movie star? Oh, you know, even after I won the Golden Globe, I came home. Well, that's because the director didn't want me going to parties, but it wasn't a big part of my MO. In fact, at the end of the film, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but her brother, I forgot his name now, came to my hotel room in Bishop and said, I got to tell you, Marilyn, and you know, she had written the book first. He said, we were really concerned about it being a Hollywood film, and we were really concerned about who was going to play her. And I thought, if they'd seen that blonde, you know, that 60 big busted blonde, they would have been probably had a shock. He said, but we're so glad it was. And this was like the first approval I got, more than my family. We're so glad that they chose you, and really. And I had worked with him every day to see how to my hands this way, and I could tell you stories about even interrupting the shot. Jill would go, I never wore my jeans that way. Cut. Right? I'd go over and say, Jill, we're just a cowboy that you're just shooting my face. And she'd say, oh, okay. And I'd say, the lawyer, the director is going to go nuts. So just wave at me and I'll come over, right? And she was there every day but one. And I would hear the electric wheelchair coming, and it would put me in like because I felt she was the one I had to get approval from. I didn't care what anyone else thought.
Right.
And so anyway, her brother said, so we've decided, Marilyn, the whole family, that we're so glad it was you, and we hope you don't take this the wrong way, but after this film, we hope you leave the business. And my mouth sort of fell open. And they said, because you're not Hollywood. And I went, how did you know that? I mean, it was like I thought that was my secret. So, and he was right. He was right. If you can produce your own films, that's a different thing. But the business itself is pretty rough when you're as conservative as I am, morally, I should say. But I learned, when I moved to this place that I'm living here 30 years ago, a neighbor came by in his wheelchair, and I waved. He went, no, come over here. And I went, come over. Yeah, hey, hi, I'm Marilyn. He said, yeah, I know. He said, I waved you because I want to tell you a story. I said, okay. Jill Kinmont taught him how to live in a wheelchair in person. Can you imagine? I mean, that's how small the world is. I said, well, that wasn't me. He said, yeah, but you brought it out to people like me that got to hear about stuff. And that, because a lot of, I don't know about society, but people didn't give two hoots for people in a wheelchair. And maybe they're still that way, but at least now they have ramps and placards, and I think that there's a lot more awareness. When I did that film, it was sort of like when you were in a wheelchair, it was over. But not with Jill. Not only did she pass those laws and you were allowed to be a teacher in a wheelchair, you were not allowed that. They would not accept that in America. It's in one of the, I think it's in Mountain 2 where she says that. That she went to UCLA and learned German. Can you imagine? I mean, this woman had a brain, never stopped her. And I've met people that she taught in school. She went to, and then she retired to Bishop, where she taught the Paiute Indians. And what a life she had. I mean, and even with Christopher Reeves, when he became a quadriplegic, he had all the money in the world. And I saw his room, because when you're a quad, you have to be turned over once or twice a day, physically, or you don't have circulation. He had all of that fancy stuff, and she lived till she was like 78 or something. I can't remember right now, but and she didn't stop. She was camping with her husband. They did all sorts of things, fishing. I mean, she only had one muscle above her right breast, and yet she became a collected painter. Now, how is that, right? And she taught me the gravity, and she had a device that someone would put on her wrist that would hold the paintbrush.
That's amazing.
I have one of her paintings. I heard that she had this art sale once a year in the summer, and I asked a girlfriend, "Do you want to drive up?" So we did, and I said, "It'll be tomorrow." It's at 2:00, but I don't want to walk. It was at her home. I said, "These are for local people, I'm sure." And Bishop is a really sweet small town. I said, "I don't want to come in and be all, L.A. So let's wait till around 3. She said, "Okay." So I go to her house, and it is packed, body to body. I was thrilled. And it had been some years since I'd done the film, and I saw a wheelchair and assumed it was Jill. Wrong. And the woman was very overweight. And I went, ooh, because Jill was like, well, she was done every day. She looked like she'd been in a beauty parlor. Her hair, her clothes. I mean, I'm talking looking great, right? I thought, ooh, something happened, And then the woman made a turn, and it wasn't Jill. I'm like, oh, okay. So there are more people with wheelchairs. Great, Marilyn, be calm, right? And I was thrilled nobody was looking at me. And I was looking around for people. She had sold every painting, which would happen every year, I would find out. And her husband came over and said, "Oh my gosh, you missed the sale." I went, "Yeah, I guess I did." He went, "Oh, just wait a second." And he went into her workshop because he framed everything she did, and he put a frame around something that was like a test or something. And he brought it out and said, "Here, Marilyn." And I was so touched. It's hanging on my wall now. And she would say, "Oh, Marilyn, I can't believe you didn't get a real painting." I said, "No, this is beautiful." And she explained that in the spring rather, this was the first flower that snuck up through the snow. And it's that kind of like the beginning of spring. And she caught it on paint, and I love it. I'm glad I have this rather than a regular one. It meant a lot to me. And I know that Beau Bridges would stay in touch with her a bit, and he's such a lovely person. He is not a Hollywood person. He and Jeff are very into their families and exceptional people. I mean, their father, I was a hat check girl, and their father was coming on to me. I'm going, no, thank you, no, thank you. And so when I met Beau, I went, "Yeah, I've met your father before." And he went, "Oh, dear, what happened?" And I went, "Well, I was a hat check girl. There wasn't any hats. And I was reading someone's script and laughing. And he came over and he said, 'Why can't I be having a good time?' It was a great line. I told him all about the movie I was reading about. And he realized I wasn't going to respond to the overture and returned to his table. He was sitting with his wife and some friends, right? I mean, like old school, as you can pick up from now. But a lovely family. His father just liked the ladies. But he had a wonderful, I don't mean to cheapen it. I mean, he had a wonderful relationship with his family and, his wife. But like most stars, they play that game, and a lot of it can just be show, right? But anyway, I was blessed because the film was way back in college, or way back when I started, waking up. I wanted to do something that would, as I picked that phrase out of the Free Press, raise consciousness, and what it did. It did that in the best way that it helped people.
It did, and then you won the Golden Globe for it too the very next year.
That's right. So I did. Yeah. I mean, they, like I said, did no publicity. I mean, people said, "Oh, you should have been nominated for." No, it wasn't important. I did what I wanted to do, and that was to reach the public, and that her family were pleased with the end result was just the best compliment I could get, as well as the people that write these letters to me. And it's strange. It's been how many? 50 years.
50 years. Yes.
Some of these people that write these notes to me weren't even born. So I guess they see it. I get residuals, so I know it's playing somewhere.
Well, they ran it in a theater a couple of years back. Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of those films, parts 1 and 2.
Is that right?
Yes.
I heard that. I didn't believe it.
He really is, to the point where, he owns the New Beverly Cinema over on Beverly Boulevard. And so I think it was around 2015 or 2016, he ran Other Side of the Mountain parts 1 and 2 back to back as a double feature on I think it was on a Monday night, if memory serves. So he ran them on 35 millimeter. So it has played in the last 10 years. They've screened 35 millimeter prints of them for an audience at his theater. So
I mean, of all people, Quentin does violent films, right?
He's got a soft spot in his heart.
When someone said that to me, I thought they were, making it up, because you don't see that in his repertoire. And I remember saying, well, I should write him a note. I need a job. But I thought, well, maybe he liked the director. I mean, it's just so hard for me to comprehend that at this age you get that kind of recognition. So I believe you. I didn't necessarily believe the other people. Isn't that something? I hear he's living in Israel.
He is, yeah. He has a child. I met him once upon a time about 9 years ago. I was at the New Beverly for a screening of The Rosemary's Baby at midnight, and he was there. And we walked out together, and we had a chat about our mutual love for films. So it wasn't, I wasn't being a fanboy. I was just having a regular conversation with him, as it were, and it was, we had a good time chatting about what he's doing. Yeah,
that
with
is
the theater.
so cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that it's a true story.
It is.
That makes me feel like I got a big thing of roses sent to me. I'm a fan of his. Oh my goodness!
He actually talked about it not too long ago on his podcast. He has a podcast called the Video Archives podcast, where they talk about movies that, he was a video clerk before he became a director, and so he talks about movies that were in the video store that were favorites of his, and that's one of the ones he mentioned, because he did a whole show about 2 Minute Warning about a month ago.
Wow.
He did an entire show.
Well, then
about
maybe he likes the director and not me,
Well,
that was Larry.
Well, your performance is so affecting. I mean, you can't help but be, because you sell it all the way.
But 2 Minute Warning, I was just like, a chair or something. I wasn't really doing much. So that's why I thought maybe he's a fan of Larry Pierce's.
Well, I think, the other side of the mountain, you've got to be a fan of yours, because, you sell the film. I mean, you make it believable, with what you do. So,
Could you do me a favor?
Sure.
Not in this conversation, but at some point, I would love to write him a note and say we spoke. Is there a contact? Is there a polite way I could do that?
I'll see what I can do. Yeah, I think there is.
Thank you, honey.
I could probably find a way through the Video Archives podcast. It's probably out there. So yeah, I could. But yeah, I'll reach out.
I'll just throw that out. I know you've got probably a lot more things you're thinking about, but just because you mentioned that, and I always wondered, was that really I felt someone was just conning me,
No, it's a true story. He's got a soft spot in his heart, as do I, for films like Other Side of the Mountain. But yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about the sequel, before we finish. And
okay.
I know we've been talking 55 minutes. I don't want to take too much more of your time, because you've got stuff.
You're so much fun that you know how to do this so well. I would have thought it was 20 minutes. So bravo to you. You know your skill, honey. So I'm sorry, you want to talk about Mountain 2?
Yeah, we'll talk about that right quick, since we're before we finish out, because and I know I think Other Side of the Mountain 2 is just as affecting as the first film, especially that final scene where Timothy Bottoms has that soliloquy, I guess you would call it, where he has to state his case, and and the way you react to that is just amazing. But I've heard that Timothy Bottoms could be difficult. I know Peter Bogdanovich talked about it. But I don't know what your experience was. Maybe you had a lovely time.
Oh my God. I don't want to hurt anybody, but
sure.
It was painful.
Oh, wow.
I mean, so contrary. Bo is the most giving person.
Mm-hmm.
And no offense to Timothy.
Sure.
He's just not one of those people. But I remember him holding me.
Mm-hmm.
And him saying, I'll never forget it, that I was going to be sorry when this film was over, because I was really a lazy bitch and didn't like walking.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Jeez.
My mouth fell open, and I didn't know how to respond to it, because it was a close-up on me, and I'm supposed to respond to him like I feel like I'm making love, or whatever the scene was. And so it was cut, and the director came over and said, and I told him, he said, that's your problem, Marilyn. Do it right. We're doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
And you're costing, people money or something like that. And I couldn't say it on the set because the director did not want our relationship to affect the other actors. And
sure.
He was right about that. And I didn't even tell him. I don't even think I ever told him, actually. But there was a scene when we're supposed to be making love, and he said something dreadful to me on my close-up. And then the cameras are on his close-up. And I cared about the film more than I did about myself. I mean, I cared for the people were going to get it, and for my obligation to Jill. So when he said, Marilyn, you got to give me a lot. I'm just not feeling anything right now. Give me a lot, as actors will say.
Mm-hmm.
After he had just said something terrible personally to me, cameras turn around. Now it's on him, and so I give him whatever I need to make him feel good about himself, and I say whatever the line is. And I did not know, you're mic'd when you do films, right?
Sure,
so there's little microphones here. And he knew that more than I did. But so the crew were hearing this, and the crew, what did I say to him? Gosh, I wish I could remember that. Said something after he did his close-up. I said something, and the crew all stood up and clapped because they couldn't stand him by then, apparently giving them a lot of trouble. I was so impressed. I was getting applause and the director was like, what did you do, man? What did you do? And I'm like, oh, just a little line, I don't know what it was. It was so, I didn't want to show my glee, and because he was, after years, I'm not really sure, probably thought about it that night. He was having troubles in his life, mm-hmm. and then he was taking them out on me, and it wasn't working for him. It certainly wasn't going to work for the film, and that was the hardest thing to overcome. It wasn't being in a wheelchair for 12 hours. It was trying to make goo eyes at someone who was putting me down.
Oh, yeah.
But, it came out all right, which was a huge relief, because with Bo, it was like dancing. It was like natural.
Yeah,
but with this
sure.
guy, it was pulling teeth. And I'm not surprised that other people found it difficult. And I don't think he was a very happy person, I remember him saying, which is a kind of a nice thing to remember, him saying he didn't want to be there, he didn't want to make movies, he just wanted to be back with his mules. And I didn't understand that. Mules? He said, I have the best mule. I didn't understand. But I went, I love animals. I never had a mule before. He didn't want to talk to me, but it was, he softened when he said that.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's what you need for the film, fellow. But he'd done more work than me, and, I was to be put down every moment he was on the set. But when he told me that I was lazy and didn't want to walk anymore, I almost burst out laughing because it was so preposterous, right? But he would say things I wouldn't repeat. And, live and you learn, right?
That's right. Well, I know Cloris Leachman, he was in the Last Picture Show, and she famously said that he refused to shower or wear deodorant when they were shooting their scenes together, and she finally complained to Peter Bogdanovich that something was going to have to be done.
Oh, la la.
So, and I think he was doing that
He
too.
probably just got off his mule and he was smelling of mule.
Yeah, maybe.
Because that's pretty hard to show up nuts. I remember having to smile after hearing these lines about myself, and the camera's right on me, so I didn't have I couldn't warm up. He was off camera, so he could assault me. And when they said cut, I went over to the director saying, did you hear what he's saying? How am I supposed to? He needs to say, deal with it, Marilyn, and dismiss me. So I felt that as a director, he was just trying to keep respect, and that he couldn't favor anybody. But it was tough. And I understand that he did a film right after mine and had a breakdown and made me really feel for him. Well, that's what was going on all the time. He percolating. The guy was not happy.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't the right business for him, because I don't know if I've heard his name in a long time. But people would say the same of me, Adam, and now I'm looking to go back to work.
That's wonderful, because you deserve to, and I really hate that that you haven't been on screen more, and if I were in a position to hire you, I would certainly be doing it. I would be putting you to work if I had that type of power, but unfortunately I do not.
Well, when I come down to North Carolina next year, I'm joking. I've heard beautiful things about North Carolina, and I've never been there. I've been to most every state in the Union, putting on road shows when I was young. We didn't get to North Carolina. But you have, I did ask you this when we last spoke, weeping willow trees, right?
Yes.
Didn't I ask you about that?
You did. You absolutely did. Yep. That was one of our first chats.
Yeah, I'm a tree lover, and I think of North Carolina as the beautiful South that I've never got to see.
Yeah, it's Charlotte's the biggest city in North Carolina, and that's where I'm at, and it's nice here. We have a pretty good film community and people who appreciate films of the 70s, as it were. So we.
Were you born there, Adam?
I was born. I've traveled quite a bit. I've been a lot of places, but I've always resided here. I wanted to live in Los Angeles. That's where my heart's at, because I've been out there about 7 times and I just love it. But it's so cost prohibitive at this point for me to.
Isn't that the truth?
And it's
I mean, the rents are insane.
Yeah.
Is that across the country or just L.A. and New York?
As far as where I've traveled, I've been just about anywhere you can think of, and there's some places I haven't seen.
No, when you said that prices are high and prohibited, and I was just saying, it's not as rents aren't the same in North Carolina?
They're a little bit less. They're still a lot more than what they used to be, obviously with the inflation and all.
Shame.
But it's definitely. I was out in Los Angeles back in November, and even the gas prices are much more. The gas taxes are higher there, and so it's a lot. It's just a lot more. Everything's a lot pricier there.
Well, I'm told, don't leave your place, Marilyn. A 1-bedroom in West Hollywood is going for $5,000.
That sounds about right.
I was like, that's what I'm told by people in the real estate market. I said, well, that must be some 1-bedroom, I mean,
yeah.
But I asked you about that because you don't have an accent, Adam.
Oh, listen to you. You're too kind. Well, I always feel like I do, and I try to do the best I can to.
I'm listening for it. I'm waiting for it to come out, and maybe you need a glass of wine or something. But that's why I asked you, because I love accents, and you don't have. Well, maybe you have an. You sound like you're from L.A. Adam.
You're just too kind.
I mean, people tell me I have an L.A. accent. So I would definitely say, if we were meeting, I would say, you're from L.A., right? I don't get an inkling of the South.
Well, so
if you tried, did you used to have an accent and you worked on it, or what?
Well, my degree's in broadcasting, so I've been on the radio from time to time, so I had to, learn to enunciate a little bit more properly than I did when I was growing up in the deep South, So it was, so I've had to, but there's still some of it.
You don't have an, it's. See, I would say too bad, but if you wanted to get rid of it, you're an ace, dear. Really, it's quite an accomplishment. Because people tell me I have a good ear, and I'm fascinated by accents. That's why I'm pursuing this conversation. So bravo to you, honey. Bravo.
Well, I really
and you tell your mother I say hello, and that she raised a beautiful son.
Oh,
such a gentleman.
You're too kind. You're too kind. I really appreciate that. I do. And in the interest of time, I don't want to keep you any longer, but maybe we could do a part 2 on this at some point in the future, and because I would love to continue.
The part 2 film.
Yeah.
I was to do the other side of the mountain. Just really fast, I'll
Sure.
tell you this. I told you when I came in, I said, and I read the contract, and I said, you buy yourself out. Well, buying myself out blackballed me. I did buy myself out, but then when I get a job at Columbia, and I was Universal made sure I didn't work. But Mountain 2, I thought you guys were milking it. I mean, you don't want to ruin the first one, but what is there left? and I felt they were really milking it. But I mean, I'm amazed that you say you liked it as well.
I do.
I'm amazed.
I think it's a beautiful film.
Well, that
really
makes me feel like I really thought we were doing a disservice to her. But if you wow, I mean, I've never heard anything good about it.
Well, I do. I think it's a beautiful film, and I mean, you again, you sell it. You sell the premise of the film. The character is believable, and all the human qualities are evident on screen, and you just you nail it. You do, and I'm not pumping sunshine up your skirt. That's the honest truth. So
sunshine up. That's a cute sunshine up your skirt. I'm going to use that. That's pretty cute. Well, I feel like I'm blushing. Thank you very much, Adam.
You're quite welcome.
That's something else.
My pleasure.
50 years later.
Yes.
You tell your mother. Again, you tell her she's raised a beautiful son. I don't say that easily or many times. I can't remember ever saying that, as a matter of fact. I mean, you kind of might have picked up from me. I'm pretty candid.
And I love it.
Tell her that. That would be nice. And you can call back, honey, anytime if you need any more info.
That's great. I appreciate it. Yeah, I did record the conversation. I'm going to edit some of the things, but I'm going to get this down to it. But I'm going to post it, probably this weekend. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit your conversation together with David Seltzer, so it's like a conversation with both of you, separately but together. So people who are fans of the movie
David
will be able to hear both of your takes on the film, and I think that's going to be something that people.
Let me tell you one thing that kind of wraps it up, meaning with me and David.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me for interrupting,
sure,
but don't forget it. Okay. Oh, shoot, I did lose. I hate it when this happens.
I do, too.
I felt obligated to the script. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, and I've seen other actors that try to make it their own, which is good, but to me, you have to honor the words. And because David had done a job of lifting those words from the book, I felt obligated not to be all over the place with them. And what happened with the filming, we actually had to cut some of the reality out because it was too much for the audience.
Oh, wow.
It was like, and it almost got too, not saccharine, but too melodramatic.
Yeah.
Which we didn't want people feeling sorry for at all. And I remember working on that a lot, and I remember the director saying he liked the actress that didn't cry, that just had the one tear coming out, because they needed that champion kind of mentality. Not that I'm a champion, but that I could play that. And I just lost it again. It was having to eliminate some of the stories because we thought it would be too much for the audience. And the director and I screened it for the executives at Universal, the big tower they used to call it.
Right.
And as they came out, we were outside. He was probably smoking and pacing, right, and being nervous. When they came out, they were asking for Kleenex and angry and verbally assaulted both me and Mr. Pierce, saying, "You manipulated us in the audience. How dare you?" And my mouth fell open going, "I manipulate the audience, right?" We tried not to do that. And they were offended because they were, these really conservative suits were crying, screaming for Kleenex. And I didn't mean to have that happen. If we had put in a few stories that we cut down or eliminated that David beautifully wrote, then it would have been. But we tried not to do that. We wanted to leave the audience feeling hope. And we were both pretty darn shocked that they wrote angry. And, I felt I was just anticipating, "You'll never work in this town again," the way they responded. And then, as it would happen, it became a sleeper, and it proved that we were right and they were wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And it's the little film that could, is what I like to call it.
Yeah, that's it. You
and
got it, honey. Yeah, that is exactly the truth. Exactly the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, I do believe the audience needs, we need entertainment, but it's such a great medium to offer hope. And
Yes.
that's what I believe is our jobs as entertainers. And, there's all sorts of ways of entertaining, but I'm so glad that we got to talk and that you were someone that liked the film, and even Mountain 2. Wow, that's huge. And 3 generations. Wow. Well, I'm going to get a big head today.
Yes. It's it lives on, and I have the Blu-ray that they put out a couple of years ago. Kino Lorber put out a Blu-ray that's a double feature, and it's really nice.
Wow.
I put that on again too the week before last just to kind of refresh my memory, and I was shocked. I was really taken by. I think it's David Walsh was the cinematographer on the first one, and I think he did.
Yes, David Walsh.
Yeah, he did.
He was
it's
wonderful.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really well
I remember
shot.
the first day. It was early morning, way before I want to wake up, and it was the first shot, and I guess Larry Pierce yelled out, "Camera right," and I looked camera left. And Davey, I'll never forget this moment. Davey Walsh leaned over behind the camera, leaned over and looked and said to him, "This is what we have to work with?" Because they assumed they were going to have a pain in the ass. In the end, I've always believed you got to, the response with your crew. Are wonderful. They work so hard. They're there earlier, they're there later, and they loved me, and I loved them, and it turned out to be a good experience. I learned a lot. I had to learn on the spot, but it was a great experience, and I believe for everybody on the crew it was as well.
Yeah, and Dabney Coleman. We lost him last year. I have to.
Oh, Dabney, what a character. What a wonderful character. Dabney, because you know L.A. enough to know about Dantana's, right?
Oh, yes, of
that
course.
That restaurant. So he asked me out to dinner, and we just knew each other from the set. It was he wasn't calling for it was just, "You want to have dinner?" I said, "Sure." So I met him at Dantana's, and he said, I always eat this, New York steak. So I ordered New York steak. So we're laughing, having a good time with a martini or whatever. Don't think anything of it. And the next day in Variety it says, "New to you, Dabney Coleman, Marilyn Hassett are the new item." I'm like, what? Literally the next day. And I was such a naive person. I went, how did that happen? Yeah, there were good people on that set.
It sure sounds like it, and I'm delighted to hear some of the stories. It's been wonderful. Well, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I promise this time I'm gonna let you go and enjoy your evening. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and this has been just wonderful.
My pleasure. Oh, I wanted to ask, excuse me for interrupting.
Sure, no
I meant
problem.
to ask you a few times ago. Where is this going to be published, dear?
I have a podcast. It's called Adam's Corner, is what it is, and it will be on. I'll have it up on YouTube, and I will have it up on all of the regular places where the interview I did with David Seltzer is actually a video. We did a video interview, so we get to actually see him on there.
Cool.
And then you and I will just be audio. I'll put some pictures from the film up over our conversation so that people can hear our audio.
Lovely.
And that's what I'll do. And so
that's lovely, honey. I'm glad to hear that. I'm still amazed that it has the life it's had, which means I made the right choice.
Well, I think people are going to love it. People are going to love it because you really haven't talked about it. I think I'm the first person who's able to get you to talk about it.
You are. That's absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was meant to be.
Well, I feel honored.
I'm grateful, honey. It was fun. It was absolutely fun.